Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time here, welcome to my channel. So for today's video, we are going to be talking about all things postpartum. I am 14 weeks postpartum, and so I thought, maybe I should film my postpartum recovery and update video for you guys. I have a whole bunch of categories I want to hit and things I want to talk about, from the recovery process in general, to first postpartum period, to changes that my body has undergone, and sex, all things postpartum. I'm going to be chatting with you guys today. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, head on down there and subscribe. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. So like I said, I have a whole bunch of different categories that I want to hit with you guys. I also asked you guys over on my Instagram what you would like to hear from me in terms of my postpartum recovery. So I have some of those questions and just things mixed in with everything that I came up with myself. So the first category we're going to be talking about is healing, which is one of the first things you do postpartum, is you heal and recover from your child's birth. So if you guys did not know, you guys did not see my labor and delivery vlog or my labor and delivery experience videos, which I will link up here as well as down below for you guys to check out if you are interested. I delivered twins vaginally 13 minutes apart. They were both around 5 pounds, so not too big of babies, but definitely not too small of babies. And so I had a standard vaginal delivery and recovery with some tearing, which I'll get into in a minute. But I came home from the hospital and it took me about 2 weeks to feel completely healed down there. I think within the first week or so is when my stitches started to dissolve. So like I said, I did tear. And if I remember correctly, I think I only had like a level 1 tear. I think that's what it's called. And I think I had around 6 stitches. I can't remember exactly. I also don't know if anyone ever told me exactly, but from my understanding, it was a very slight tear, nothing too severe. And I only had a few stitches down there. So when it came to recovering, I did have to take care of those stitches and go through that healing along with just like the general healing process. And within the first week was when I started to feel my stitches heal. They actually got super tight and itchy, as does like any cut or scar or anything you get stitches with. It just feels a little tight as it heals and it gets a little itchy. So in terms of like products I used that helped to heal down there, I was given everything from the hospital. I mainly used 3 things. The first being the Dermaplast spray for itching and pain, which I swear by that. That really helped. I also was given an ointment, which I can't remember the name of, but I will put it right here. I should have got it from upstairs, but to be completely honest, I don't know if I still have it. I might have thrown it out, but if I didn't, I'll put the name right here. It was just an ointment that I used kind of in rotation with the Dermaplast. They did the same thing. It was to help with itching and pain. And then specifically for my stitches, I used witch hazel pads. You can use Tucks, but I used the, now I can't think of the brand, Dr. Heals or something like that. I will leave it down here as well. I used just witch hazel pads for treating like the itchiness with my stitches. So those were 3 products I used that I really swear by. I think that they really helped the recovery process, the pain and the itching. But aside from products, I used the perinatal bottle that the hospital gave me. It's just a spray bottle. You fill it up with warm water and you spray down there as you urinate so it doesn't burn. And also it is used to like wipe. You don't wipe with toilet paper for, I don't think I did for like maybe 2+ weeks. You use the perinatal bottle instead. And I also did sitz baths. I think I only did like 2. But that is just where you sit in like the sitz bathtub with some warm water, and it helps to clean and heal everything down there. So I would say within like 2 weeks time, my stitches were healed. I did take a mirror and look down there probably around the 2-week mark, and I was very confused because I did not see where my stitches could have been. Everything looked completely normal, so I don't really know where you get stitched when they stitch you. I know it's down there somewhere, but I would say within 2 weeks time, the healing process was basically complete. I was not uncomfortable. I really wasn't uncomfortable to begin with. Like, right after giving birth. I never remember it being super painful to urinate or anything like that. I don't remember it burning too badly. And I also don't remember it being super painful to sit. The only time it was painful to sit was when my stitches were healing and they just felt a little tight. And if I moved a certain way, I kind of felt like they were tugging. But other than that, I never really felt much pain sitting or really pain downstairs postpartum. Maybe I was lucky, I don't know, but to me it wasn't all that painful to kind of recover and heal my downstairs area. So I think that's everything I want to talk about in terms of just healing. It took about 2 weeks. I did have stitches. Oh, they were like dissolvable. I didn't have to go and get them removed, so they dissolved on their own within maybe like a week and a half. Maybe after 2 weeks is when I stopped using the products. I really only use like the Dermaplast and those kinds of products when I would, after I would urinate or if my stitches were bothering me. But once my stitches dissolved, I didn't really feel the need to use any of them. So I stopped using all of those. And I think I stopped using the perinatal bottle around like the 2-ish week mark. Alright, I'm sorry if like my position changed or anything like that, but my computer died and I have like all my notes on here. So I had to run upstairs, grab my charger, run back downstairs. And now we're going to be talking about bleeding and my first postpartum period. So along with healing the downstairs area, you do bleed postpartum, and I believe I bled for maybe 2-ish weeks, 2 to 3-ish weeks, but by the last week it wasn't anything bad at all. But I did bleed for the first few weeks, which is totally normal. I remember though, the first time standing up after delivering the boys and looking back at the amount of blood that had come out of me that was on the bed, was not expecting that at all. But by the time you leave the hospital, you're not really bleeding anything like crazy. It's something that they really keep their eye on to make sure that you're not hemorrhaging. And so by the time you leave the hospital, it's nothing super crazy. I did use the really thick hospital pads probably for the first like 3 to 5 days, and then after that I used just pads that I bought from CVS. They were the Always brand. I started out with the really long ones and I just slowly got shorter and shorter, and they weren't super thick. They were just like the overnight ones that were probably like this thick, like the normal ones I wear for my period. And so I wore those for a few weeks and then the bleeding stopped. But I did not get my first postpartum period until like last week. So like I said, I'm like 14 weeks postpartum and I didn't get my period until I was about 13 weeks postpartum, and that I think is because I was breastfeeding. I actually got my period the day that I stopped breastfeeding the boys, which I thought was super ironic. I thought I was gonna get it a few weeks earlier. I was having like a lot of cramps, but I never got it. But I got it the day that I stopped breastfeeding. So it took me 13 weeks to get my first postpartum period, and it was pretty heavy. Now, my periods before I conceived the twins were not super heavy, and I think that's just because I was on birth control. I was on birth control for about 8 years, I would like to say. So all that time, my periods were never super heavy. Maybe 2 to 4 days long. I could put a tampon in and keep it in for 4+ hours, and it was pretty easy breezy. This period was not so easy breezy. I would put a tampon in and within an hour or two completely bleed through it. It was like that for probably 4 days. I had my period for a total of 6 days, and so the first 4 days it was super heavy, which is something that I'm not used to experiencing because my periods were never super heavy. So I was like, what the heck? But everyone I've talked to had said like your first postpartum period is a little bit on the heavy side, and as you go on and get your period, they will hopefully regulate and lighten out. Now, since I am done breastfeeding and since I've got my first postpartum period, I really want to get on birth control so we have no more babies in this household for a while. Unfortunately, my gynecologist is not taking patients during this whole coronavirus quarantine period. They're only seeing pregnant women. It's the same people I saw when I was pregnant. Excuse me. So I can't go and get on birth control right now, but I do want to get back on the pill. That is what I took previously. And so hopefully once I get on birth control, my periods will also be a little lighter because of the birth control. All right, so I think that is everything for like healing, bleeding, all like the icky, gross stuff. I think that's everything I have to say about that. Now we're going to talk about breastfeeding, which was an experience and a half, and I kind of have a lot to go through because breastfeeding for me definitely had its ups and downs. So I'm gonna kind of go week by week here. I have it broken up into like chunks of weeks. So we're gonna start with weeks 0 to 4. So from the moment the boys were born up until they were 1 month old, the boys were, for the most part, exclusively breastfeeding. I think we only gave them formula like 2 times in that period of time, but they only took like an ounce or 2 of it when they did take it. So for the first 4 weeks of their life, they were exclusively breastfed. The boys actually did really well latching early on in the hospital. I remember them being brought into me and I was told we were going to try breastfeeding for the first time, and it was super easy to get them to latch on. So I was super happy about that because the boys were born premature. They were born at 36 weeks gestation, so 1 month premature. And I know that latching can be something that can be difficult for a preemie, but the boys latched pretty well early on. I breastfed the boys one at a time in the beginning. I don't think I started tandem until they were like 2-ish months old, and that's just because the boys were so small. It was really hard for me to manipulate them on the breastfeeding pillow that I did use. So I breastfed them one at a time, and I would feed them about 15-ish minutes at a time. There was 1 week where I experienced a lot of pain, and I think it was Ben who latched poorly around week 2, and because of that entire week I was in so much pain. But I just used some organic nipple butter. I iced them. I made sure to take care of my nipples so that I didn't experience too much cracking, which I really didn't. It was just like that 1 week. And so I think I adjusted pretty well, and so did the boys. I think we adjusted pretty well to breastfeeding early on. Now, around weeks 5 through 8, that is when I began tandem feeding the boys, and that made my life so much easier. Around this time is the time that my mom actually flew back home to Florida, and I was home alone with the boys most of the day. And so when I breastfed them one at a time, the other one would be crying. Usually my mom would be holding him, but when I no longer had my mom to help and Harris was at work, it was really hard to breastfeed one and remain calm when the other one was crying and screaming. So I started to tandem feed, and that made my life so much easier. I only had to sit there for 15 to 25 minutes at a time. I could get them both done and it was over with. And so I did tandem for a few weeks, and I also began to introduce formula at night around this time. I started to feel like my supply was diminishing and was struggling a little bit, and I did do some things to try and up my supply. I remember I drank mother's milk tea, I ate a lot of oats, I just did things like that. I also tried to increase the amount that I pumped, but I honestly hated pumping. That was like the one thing I hated about breastfeeding. So my supply began to suffer a little bit, so Harris and I supplemented with formula just the first bottle of the night, like the one right before the boys went to bed. And we did that for a while. We started that around 7 to 8-ish weeks, I would say. And the first formula the boys took was the Similac supplemental formula, and I was given that by their pediatrician. And then after they finished that, I think we moved on to the Pro Total Advanced, which they did fine on, but they were a little bit gassy. So we actually tried to switch them to the Pro Total Comfort, which was a disaster. The boys got super constipated from that. And now we are giving them the Traumagen hypoallergenic formula. If you want to hear all about why, I talked about it in their 3-month update that I posted previously. I think that was like the last video I posted. But we went through a few different formulas, and about 8 to 12 weeks of age, they were receiving pretty much half breast milk and half formula. And that slowly went down, like my breastfeeding. It went from me breastfeeding them the first 3 feedings of the day, and then getting formula for the last 3 or 4 feedings a day, to then just getting breast milk the first 2, and then sadly it went to the first feeding of the day. And by the time they hit 12 or 13 weeks, I had to stop breastfeeding. This was a really hard decision for me. If you guys have been following, you would know I posted a video, I don't remember what it was titled, maybe like being honest with myself or something like that. Around 8-ish weeks, I would say, I had like an all-out panic attack breakdown. The boys just were never satisfied, it seemed like, and I was like beating myself up over it. Breastfeeding became more of a struggle than something I enjoyed. And so that is why I made the decision to kind of split it 50-50. And doing that was so hard for me. But once I made that decision, as weeks went on and I had to start cutting out more breastfeeding sessions, it definitely was easier for me to do that because I could see how happy the boys were, how satisfied they were, how full they were, how much they were growing. Like, I knew I made the right decision looking back, but I remember that day having that panic attack. It was horrible. My mom actually flew in from Florida. This was right before the whole pandemic thing occurred and quarantine was put into place. My mom actually flew up from Florida to help me wean myself off of breastfeeding. That's how much support I needed during the time, and I'm so glad that she came up here and she helped me with it. And so we did that around 8 weeks, and just from then on, we've just been slowly weaning the boys. And the boys actually began sleeping almost through the night within the past like 2 weeks. They go from around 7:30, 8ish till 5:30 in the morning. And so when they would start waking up in the morning from those longer stretches and I would breastfeed them, they just were not satisfied at all. They would eat, and within an hour they were hungry again, or I would feed them and then I would try and give them some formula after, and they would gulp it down in seconds. So once I started sleeping through the night, I made the decision that it was time to completely stop breastfeeding, which was an easy decision in the moment. I was just like, let's just give them formula. But now that it's been about a week or so of me no longer breastfeeding the boys, I do miss it. It was such a bonding moment for the boys and I felt very connected to them. It was so calming. It was so nice to have that experience. I'm so happy that I was able to breastfeed them for 12 weeks. I definitely wish I could have done it longer. I know in the beginning I told myself like I'm only going to breastfeed for 12 weeks, but now that the 12 weeks has came and gone, I do miss it a lot. So I'm no longer breastfeeding the boys. They are solely on the Nutramigen formula, and so that is, my breastfeeding experience. It was pretty easy in terms of, like getting into it with the boys in the beginning, and it was smooth sailing for the first month or so. We did hit that hiccup where I had to make the decision to start to wean them and kind of cut out some feedings. And so overall, looking back, I really don't have too much negative to say about my experience. I definitely want to breastfeed my children going forward. Like, the more children I have, I definitely want to breastfeed again. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to touch on in terms of my breastfeeding experience. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my body, which has definitely been something that I've gotten a lot of questions on, which can sound weird, but I don't mean it in like a negative way. My foot is so asleep right now too, so I'm trying to wake it up before I get back into position. All right, I have to like put my legs up. So I'm going to try and insert photos as we go through this, like in terms of like talking about my postpartum body. So we're gonna start off with right after birth. I just wanna say the woman's body is insane. I remember after I delivered the boys and I went into the bathroom, that first time I was able to get up and walk around and I looked at myself in the mirror, I was honestly in shock. I got huge. I've said it like a million times. I seriously got huge with the boys. And so it was so amazing to see how much it had already begun to go down. I was super swollen, I would say, for the first week. My belly was super weirdly shaped. I will try and find photos and insert it here. It looked like a boob almost. It was such a weird shape. My belly button had gotten extremely stretched out and basically flattened by the time I delivered the boys. And so after I delivered the boys, it almost looked like I didn't have a belly button. I was super nervous that it wasn't going to go back. Thankfully it has gone back, but it's just like not in the right position. But for the first 2 weeks I was super swollen. I would say mainly the first week, and by the second week I wasn't feeling as swollen as I had. And by week 4, I would say I felt pretty much normal. I was fitting into my pre-pregnancy clothes. Of course I was still a little bloated and I had a little bit of pudge, but the swelling for the most part had gone away almost completely by 4 weeks postpartum. Around a week postpartum, I actually developed a really strange rash, which I still don't know what this rash was. I remember at the boys' bris, which is a Jewish ceremony you do, which is typically done a week after they're born. I was so itchy. My rash had gotten so bad, and it was kind of just like a ring around my stomach. I had to receive a ointment from my OBGYN, and once I got that, it went away. I still to this day have no idea what it was, but that's something I experienced postpartum and in the recovery process was a weird rash. By week 6, I had lost most of the baby weight. I had gone to my 6-week postpartum appointment, and when I was weighed, I was pretty close to my pre-pregnancy weight. I had gained 50 pounds total with the twins. I started at 122 pounds and I finished at 172 pounds. Right? Is that 50 pounds? I know I gained exactly 50 pounds. And when I went to my 6-week postpartum checkup appointment, I was 136 pounds. So I had about 14 pounds left to go to get to my pre-pregnancy weight, which I just want to say I was super skinny before I got pregnant with the boys. I was probably the skinniest I've ever been since I was like a child at that point. So I definitely don't see myself going back to that weight. I was always around 130 to 135 pounds like throughout high school and my first few years of college. I did gain the freshman 15 my freshman year of college, but other than that, I really stuck to around 130-ish pounds. So I was extremely light when I got pregnant with the twins, and so I don't see myself getting back to that weight exactly. If I could get back down to 130 pounds, I would be completely satisfied with my weight. So I would really only have about 6-ish pounds to go to get back to that weight. I don't know how much I weigh now just because we don't own a scale, and so I haven't been weighed since my 6-week postpartum checkup, and like I mentioned, I'm 14 weeks postpartum now. So I don't know how much I weigh, but I would assume I only have a few more pounds to lose to get back to my pre-pregnancy weight. Around weeks 8 and 9 is when I began to do some sort of physical activity, which it still isn't anything crazy. I try and go on a walk with the boys on nice days, and then if I don't go on a walk with the boys, I do at-home workouts. I've been doing Chloe Ting workouts and just different workouts I see on Instagram or YouTube or anything like that. Things that I could get done within like a 15-minute time period just because I do have the boys, and so I try and squeeze something in a day, and I've been doing that since about 8-ish, 9-ish weeks postpartum. And so being 14 weeks postpartum now, like I said, I don't know how much I weigh, but I do have to say I'm pretty satisfied with how my body looks. One of the questions I've been asked is, how did I come to terms with the changes that my body has undergone and how have I accepted my different body? Which it is a day-by-day thing. Some days I wake up in the morning and I'm super satisfied with the way I look, and other days I wake up and I'm super sad with the way I look. There are some days that I scroll through my camera roll and I look back at pictures of what I looked like before I had the boys, and I get super sad knowing that my body will never look that way. And then some days I look at myself in the mirror and I'm able to talk to myself and say, your body did an amazing thing, which it did. It did do an amazing thing. And, I should love all the changes that happened to my body, but it's easier said than done sometimes. I did get a linea nigra and it did get pretty dark, and at this point a lot of it has started to go away. If you guys don't know, that's like the dark stripe that goes down your belly when you're pregnant. And I did start to kind of exfoliate some of that, so that is going away, and definitely like now that that has started to go away, I think my belly looks even better. It looks more like it did before I had the boys. But of course, I don't think it will ever go back to what it was just because my belly button is still a little strange. It's definitely not where it should be. It's a little higher up. I have a lot of loose skin and I do have stretch marks, which the stretch marks didn't really bother me all that much. To me, what my eyes gravitate towards is the darkness still from my linea nigra and the loose skin from where my belly button was pierced. That piece of skin definitely is like the skin that stretched out the most. And so that's what my eyes gravitate towards like when I look at myself. But for the most part, I don't think it looks that bad. For being 3 months postpartum with having had twins, I'm pretty satisfied. And when I wear high-waisted clothing, you really can't tell. I kind of just look like I did pre-pregnancy. It's only when like you see my belly that you can say, she definitely had a baby. But it's overall not that bad. I know I still have so much more to go in terms of like accepting my body and learning to love it and learning to appreciate it, if that makes sense. Like, I need to appreciate what my body was able to do. I need to appreciate that I was able to carry twins, have a baby. You know, these are things that some people take for granted. There are a lot of women out there, and even same-sex couples, who wish and want a baby but can't get it. And so I need to appreciate that I was able to have a baby, love my babies, love my body. And so just know that if you're having struggles with your postpartum body, it's a process, it's a day-by-day thing. And you know, I think we need to kind of normalize the postpartum body, normalize stretch marks, normalize not perfect bodies, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say in terms of my body, insecurities. I'm definitely insecure. I know I don't really come across as insecure when I talk about it. I'm putting my postpartum body out there for the internet to see. But trust me when I tell you, there are days that I am super insecure about it. It's something I need to work on. Oh, quickly, if you guys are wondering what products I use to kind of help with my stretch marks, I just use bio oil and some Palmer's firming lotion. That's what I use for the stretch skin. I haven't really seen much results from either product, but I do use them religiously every day, you know, in hopes that something's going to help. But other than that, I just don't do much in terms of like getting rid of the stretch marks. Like, I haven't done any treatments for them. I haven't done anything like that. I'm kind of just letting my body run its course. I know really the only thing that helps with stretch marks is time. They're scars technically, and you need to let them heal with time. So I just try to moisturize them, and that's how I take care of them. So the last thing I'm going to quickly touch on, which I'm sure, actually, I don't know if any of you guys are wondering this, and I don't know if this is going to be TMI, but this is something that I was super curious about and something that I thought about a lot postpartum, like right out the gate, and that is sex. I am going to quickly talk about my first time having sex postpartum. I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you're a family member and you don't want to hear this, I would click off now, but I'm quickly going to go through, you know, my first postpartum sexual experience. So I was super nervous. Of course, I had delivered 2 babies. I had gotten stitches. I had healed down there. You know, it's a traumatic thing for your body to go through. And so I was super nervous that the first time having sex was going to be super painful. I put it off for a long time. I don't think Harris and I had sex until maybe 8 or 9 weeks postpartum. I know you're allowed to engage in sex around 6 weeks postpartum once you're cleared from your doctor, and I was cleared from my doctor at my 6-week appointment, but I was still super terrified to actually do it, and so I put it off for quite a while. And so the first time that Harris and I decided to do anything, I made sure to voice my concerns to him and tell him I was super nervous, that it was going to be painful, and that I, you know, not only was nervous about like how it was going to feel, but I was nervous about like being exposed, like my postpartum body. But I have to say it was a positive experience. It definitely was not as painful as I thought it was going to be. I was a little bit uncomfortable, but I was okay after that. And so just know, if you are nervous for your first postpartum encounter, just know that somebody is screaming. Like I was saying, if you're nervous for your first postpartum experience, just know that it's going to be okay. Voice your concerns to your partner and come to some sort of agreement and kind of game plan as to how you're going to approach it. All right, so the screaming in the background was Ben. He woke up from his nap and was not very happy. Harris was upstairs with him. Don't worry, he was not just like screaming his head off. But mommy went upstairs and grabbed him because he was very sad, and he's going to finish off the video with us. So I don't even know where I was. I think I was talking about my first postpartum experience having sex. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. If you're nervous, talk to your partner, voice your concerns, make sure you have like a clear plan of how you're gonna go into things, and it should be all good. All right, so I think that's everything I wanted to touch on. Hopefully, I feel like I was just blabbering for the last however long of that clip because I was listening to him scream upstairs and wasn't really paying attention to what I was saying. But I hope this video wasn't too much all over the place. You know, my videos usually are sometimes, and I like to blab a lot, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed this postpartum update. Hope you guys enjoyed seeing this little chubby boo-boos who's very sad right now. We're gonna go cuddle, okay? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, head on down there and subscribe. I appreciate that always. And with that being said, we'll see you in our next video.